All right, last video, last chapter. Remember, we're not doing chapter 13, and the test will not include chapter 13. Alrighty, now we're looking at the relationship between family and work life and how that mixes or doesn't mix. The majority of families with children now either have a lone parent or both parents in the workforce. Most married or cohabitating partners hold jobs. Paid employment takes up a large portion of the day and demands a great deal of energy. It has far-reaching consequences for family life, including care of children, while parents work, and the responsibility for household duties. As the baby boom generation ages, there will be a greater need for elder care, and because of competing demands, some family members can suffer burnout. Stress can, however, be reduced by flexible work hours and policies associated with that. This chapter is going to examine the many important issues related to family and the work world. And it's worth probably noting right now, beautiful coffee, there's nothing better, especially when you're sequestered. This chapter is very prominent in the minds of many people today as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, where people are having to work remotely who haven't had to work remotely or don't know how to work remotely. The college is a good example. There were only 7 people in all of the college who taught online exclusively, and I was one of them, and most everybody teaches in class. And as you know, it's all going online or going remote in some capacity. And so this is the challenge, is how do we do that? And you can probably experience for yourself the challenges of trying to maintain work, family, or school, family, and work. It's a headache. It's a challenge. And we all are working hard to try to do so. So let's look at this particular chapter. We're going to look at the one family, 2 income, this new reality that exists in Canada. More and more families affected by the interplay between work and family responsibilities. A significant societal trend is increase in number of women employed outside the home. I'll be referring from time to time to the table 12.1 there. This is growing trend in our society. 1931, 16% of women had paid employment, 70% of men. By 2015, and that's a lot of years, 50% of women were employed. So why is this? Why has this shift occurred? Well, women are more educated. More education, and that's a life chance. I've mentioned that in week 1 about the significance of a life chance. Education is a primary life chance anywhere in the world. If you have education, you increase your standard of living, your health, your ability to parent, smaller families. There's a lot of associated, co-related successes associated with education. So that's one reason why more women are employed. The labor market has changed. The cultural values have changed. We no longer view women working full-time as a barrier. The proportion of dual income families has gone from about 40% in the 1970s to a little over 60% in the 90s. Leveling off since then, it's at about 69% in 2004. In table 12.2, you'll notice that the employment rate for the 25 to 44-year-old men dropped about 5% from 1980 to 2015, while women increased about 20% for the same age group and time frame. So having 2 incomes is financially an improvement. However, it can seriously affect parenting, household responsibility, and essentially the division of labor within the home. Who does what now that we have 2 incomes coming in? So work and family interact both positively and negatively. We'll explore some of these relationships between work and family. We're going to start with changing gender roles. Now, families are changing faster than the roles and expectations have for the balance of family and work. What we thought men or masculine, was about and feminine was about, men and women, and what they were responsible to do within a family, that's been changing, especially with having 2 incomes. The traditional family, husband the breadwinner and the wife comes, is at home caring for the children in the household. This is also known as intensive mothering, is not nearly as common as it was in the past. More common are dual earners and a need for balanced responsibility. A balance of responsibility needs to be worked out. Now, it's important to note, I'm saying dual earners, that's not dual careers, that's not dual jobs. It just means that both parents have a source of income coming in. It could be part-time, it could be sessional or seasonal, it could be transitional, it could be full-time. So role expectations. When men and women find the challenge of balancing how they feel about themselves in relationship to those of society's expectations. Now, one of the positive trends has seen that men are more involved in child rearing than in the past. Now, this represents about 1/3 of couples. That means there's still 2/3 that are dual earners, where the woman is still responsible for the child care and household responsibilities. This used to be known as the second shift. It's now the term is used as the double shift. My first shift is at work, my second shift is at home. This is a paid shift, this is a non-paid shift. So some of the expectations of family members are a major stress in dual income families. Traditional ideals of family togetherness and quality time with children don't coincide with dual income families. Expectations of employers and fellow co-workers may be anti-family, and shifts can be a cause for major stress in family. Given the many demands of their time, dual earner couples often spend relatively little time with friends and extended family. When social networks are limited, families may experience lower levels of social support. Many thus feel higher levels of stress. So the dual income family, as much as it brings resources into the family, it adds additional stressors and demands into the family. So some of the household responsibilities, they've altered. Now, hard physical housework has been reduced through the introduction of utilities, things like electricity and running water. Technology has made household work different rather than less. That is to say, we get the advent of the dishwasher, laundry machines. They do work quickly, or dish and laundry, however, but there's always more work. The work doesn't seem to subside. I have equipment to make the jobs easier and quicker, but I still have more work. The amount of time spent on housework is related to income level, age, and the quality of housing, personal standards for meal preparation, and cleanliness. Most housework is still done by women. The shift from wage earner husbands to dual earner families has not meant an equal shift in household responsibilities. Rather, led to conflicts over how household work and childcare should be divided. Check out the table 12.3. Now, since men traditionally have not had to concern themselves with family care, some viewing housekeeping chores as unmasculine. Husbands tend to do the highest share of housework, about 35%, when partners' earnings are equal. And so there's an indirect positive outcome by having dual income. There's a recognition of the need to distribute household responsibilities. Working couples and their social networks, well, when social networks are limited, the family may experience more stress. The networks need to actively give and take. It needs to be balanced, and when that's not happening, some of that support is cut off and some of the isolation starts to increase. And you can already appreciate the effect of isolation has on us by being isolated in your home. Care for family members. It's a broad topic because it includes a lot of things, but let's start with that. This is, of course, really important in families generally, especially as we enter the sandwich generation. If you remember, the sandwich generation is me looking after my family and looking after my children. So my parents and my children. I'm the meat in the sandwich. And so with care of family members, the family has been more stressed at this period of time. Caregiver strain is what it's known. In the health field, for those of you who are interested, it's often referred to as compassion fatigue. Care strain is a term used to describe the burden in the caregiver's day-to-day lives that can be attributed to the need to provide care and assistance to someone else. Now, the bit of difference from compassion fatigue, these things decrease with the amount of caregiving, but you need to put back into your system. So you need to do things for yourself to ensure that you recharge that battery, because the battery's not being recharged on its own. Now, some of the direct costs include the reduced income, to caregiver strain. Maybe I can't go to work and take that shift because I got to stay home and look after a sick child. So there's some reduced income and missing work. And that's a direct, effect of that cost. The indirect can be less social time, reduced work advancement, physical and emotional cost, limited rest. You just tire out. Childcare. Well, childcare in Canada is closely tied to social attitudes towards women's work. Long-held societal assumptions that children are best off at home and looked after by their mothers. Daycare centers were established only when it benefited society, either from the desire for better supervision of children, which is certainly not a very positive spin in terms of how that reflects on mothers who were raising their children, but alternatively from the need for mothers to join the workforce, with more women entering the workforce because the families needed a second income, may have driven the development of and establishment of daycares more strongly. If you look at figure 12.2, childcare in Canada, you look at some of the options available, and I'll leave that for you. Visitation in childcare, and figure 12.1, childcare can be unregulated or regulated. If it's unregulated care, that is provided by someone other than the parents or immediate family. It could be a friend, it could be the person down the street who provides unregulated daycare provision. Whereas regulated care is usually center-based, where services is provided by a college-trained early childhood educators and meets the provincial standards. Now, in past decades, modest increases in the number of regulated space. It doesn't seem that the space for regulated daycares is growing as rapidly as the need is. Nonetheless, in 2014, space available for only about 25% of the Canadian children between the ages of 0 and 12 years of age. Now, when we say, childcare spaces, that's before and after school programs included. Excuse me. Love me my coffee. Changes in availability and cost of daycare affect women more than men because they are still expected to provide the bulk of care. Now, there are several factors that influence the kind of childcare parents will choose. The age of the child will have an impact on that. The parent's income or job type might have an impact. Family characteristics. The community in which you live in may or may not have a wide variety of regulated or unregulated daycare opportunities. Now, whether or not if they are regulated, there are 4 pillars to childcare in Canada. And they're described, we're going to look at all 4. The first one is government funding. Provincial and territories receive federal government transfers. We pay taxes to the province and to the federal. Federal takes those tax dollars and divides them between the provinces and sends them as transfers. And that each province, when they receive their transfer fund, can use them for different reasons. In Ontario, it's used for used for education, welfare, and healthcare. And so that's one of the pillars. The second pillar, income tax relief for families. The Canadian Child Benefit is a tax-free payment based on families' income. The third is maternity and parental leave and the benefits associated with that. 17 weeks of leave for the mother for a newborn child or new adopted child, and the next 35 weeks can be split between the two parents. And then fourth is the universal and free kindergarten. It's offered throughout the public school system. Now, that's looking at children in a very, quick overview. We're going to touch now on options for elder care. Remember I mentioned the sandwich generation. We don't have to just look after our own children. Some families here are also looking after parents. And as baby boomers age, will be growing and age and will be growing, the need for elder care services in Canada is growing as well. Age in place and home care are growing interests for seniors and who choose and would prefer to live in their own home. Now, if you check figure 12.4, and in particular box 12.3, elder care in Canada, you'll see, and there's an overview of some of the elder care options. I'm trying to cut the size of the video down so you can find those information yourself, okay? It's in your textbook. Some of the conflicts that exist between work and family. There's all sorts of conflicts that lead to work-family conflict. This is defined as the stress that arises when work and family demands are mutually incompatible. With the advent of technology development, email, for example, I can remember when email first came out and how important it became for everybody. It seemed that work kind of expected that you were available 24/7. With the advent of cell phones, tablets, and the computers and the whole kit and caboodle of technology, all can and does influence us in a sense of availability for work. We have to put some limits on some of these things. It's why I won't respond to emails after 6 o'clock. For example, I'm putting some limits on how my family and my work life intermingle. I know lots of people who answer emails all through the day and night. Well, how do you find that separation between family and work? So keeping that in mind, the family, there's two directions, if you will, that we can go with this. One is what's known as FIW, which is family interferes with work. Now, as you would expect, this relates to when family interferes with work. Example, going to work when you have a sick child at home, or a friend with a friend. Your mind is on your child while at work. This is where your family interferes, or maybe because you have to get your child to karate class, you leave work an hour earlier to go pick up your child and take them off. That's where family interferes with work. The alternative, or the other, is the one that's called WIF, and that is work interferes with family. Now, here the work interfere family life, the more typical interference. It's not as usual for family to interfere with work. It's more familiar that work will interfere with family. Work may have higher expectations of you and your time. You work 9 to 5. However, your boss expects you to work some weekends or evenings. And that's not atypical. I have received emails before from my employer at night or on the weekend, and you feel compelled you need to answer. You can't ignore that. And so that can, for many families, affect their quality of life. Now, we sometimes sacrifice family for work, as our culture does value money, and there are times when that extra money does or might help one's family, but there's a great deal of stress and uncertainty when these boundaries are blurred. So that's our next topic here, is blurred boundaries. If you've ever brought work home just to finish it up, this is what is known as blurred boundaries. With all the work-family juggling that we have to do in order to balance family and work, the result in one or both of these is a role concern. Now, we're going to look at some of these role concerns with this balance between family and work. And one is what's known as role spillover. When work and family roles and/or the demands associated with those for time interfere with each other. I've been in jobs where you get assigned something that has to be done by tomorrow. Well, that means a lot of work has to be generated before you can hand that in by tomorrow, but your boss asks you to have it done, so you work through the night. That's role spillover. I've got two, and they interfere with one another, because maybe I promised my daughter to read her a story at night. Who am I going to deny? And then there's role overload. Role overload refers to when the demands for your time and energy that are associated with performing multiple roles are too great. They're too great to get them all done, and you can't do them very adequately, and you can't do them comfortably. And that's going to cause undue stress. If you're always balancing, I have to do this at night and I have to make this promise, and you're compromising. These are strategies to employ to manage this. You manage your work's cycle and family cycles to advantage the important things from each. So instead, if you know you've got a lot of activities with your children and a lot of things you want to do with your family as they're young, then you don't schedule work advancements during that period of time. You look to come later. Purchasing time-saving products like non-ironing shirts and clothes, or you have a dishwasher, you have all the sort of technology to make household more easy. Maybe you get a cleaning service to come in, and that's all certainly easier with two incomes. But these are ways to sort of reduce some of the family expectations that might take time away from looking after your kids the way you want, and work. Now, as you may have anticipated, another term that's more common today is known as burnout. Now, burnout is the state that occurs when persons experience prolonged stress without learning how to cope with it. Now, this is something that may be not only family related. The way we have this is something that we may have experienced, and I'm sure you've had this experience of burnout. It can have many direct and indirect impacts on adults as well as their children. The term used to describe the burdens in caregivers' day-to-day lives that can be attributed to the need to provide care and care assistance to someone else, this is known as caregiver strain. This is the physical, emotional, and financial stresses associated with caring for a dependent. Now, relatively little consideration has been given to the interplay between family and work responsibility and the care of aging family members. Much more attention has been paid to childcare. So let's look at that family-work balance. Self-defined state of well-being that recognizes the interrelatedness of work life and life apart from work. It consists of three components. One is the time balance, equal time given to work and family. Involvement balance, equal levels of psychological involvement both in work and family roles. And satisfaction balance, equal levels of satisfaction in work and family roles. That's a goal. And we will come on a continuum of how successful we are. To we're managing, to we're doing really well, to we're doing really badly. So some of the directions that we go to sort of offset this would be flexible work arrangements is one of the ways to address the problem of competing demands of work and family. And we see this occurring right now. Now, this is certainly very topical with the COVID-19 pandemic, looking at how things have gone remote, work from home, all within 2 weeks. Some examples of flexible work include flex time. Now, flex time is a system of working a set number of hours with a starting and finishing times chosen with agreed limits to the employee. So it's not typical 9 to 5. You can create flexible hours depending on what is being done family-wise and what's being done work-wise. And that can be very effective. Women with flexible work schedules feel less stressed by family responsibilities than those with more rigid schedules. Flex time has had some mixed reviews as to how effective it might really be. Telework, and this is probably something we're starting to see a little bit more of, a work arrangement in which the employee works outside the home, outside the office and more often in the home. This appeals to people who commute long distances every day or who do not want children to spend 10 hours every day in a child care, or who want flexibility to schedule daily work. Needs to be constantly connected. That just means we have never really been off the job is what ends up happening. It's linked to lower family satisfaction. Because if you work remotely, I find that when I started working online, I was working 16 17 hours a day to get work done, create the videos, develop the scripts, gather the assets, do the videotaping, editing the videotaping, rendering the videos, posting them on YouTube, bringing them into Blackboard. It took me for hours, and it took me a while to learn how to create a workflow. But it didn't reduce my hours working remotely. It increased my hours. Another is reduced hours of work. It's not as common job sharing or work arrangements in which two employees share one full-time job with the prorated salaries and benefits. Now, part-time work allows individuals to fulfill care responsibilities for children or older relatives. Women more than men choose to work fewer hours. Well, again, powered through. That is our last video, our last chapter. Please look after yourself. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe. Wash regularly. Keep your distance from one another. And carry on the good fight. It's been a pleasure working with you all this semester. And I wish you nothing but good luck going forward. Bye now.